Hey there, drowsy historian here. Tonight, you're not a legionnaire marching to glory or a toga-draped philosopher pondering the stars. No, you're something much lower. You're a Roman sewer worker, one of the nameless souls who spends their waking hours wading through other people's filth so they don't have to. You don't build aqueducts, you don't sit in marble baths, you crawl beneath them. Through tunnels carved before you were born and flooded with the waste of a city that forgot you existed. You're not honoured, you're avoided, and your reward for keeping the eternal city running is disease, loneliness, and a smell that never leaves your skin. So before you slip into the stinking dark, torch flickering, sandals rotting, prayers unheard, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what cursed hour you stumbled across this story. I love knowing whose insomnia I'm keeping company. And if you'd like early access to more slow, miserable descents into history's least glamorous lives, there's a link to the Patreon down below. But for now, lie back. Don't think about what's floating by your ankles. Let's begin. Your morning starts before the sun dares show its face, because nothing that burns with the fire of Apollo should have to witness what you're about to endure. You wake on a mat that smells faintly of mildew and very strongly of whatever leaked through the walls during the night. Your joints ache before you've even stood. Your hands are cracked, stained with grime that's soaked in too deep to ever fully leave. The air already reeks, an acrid mix of spoiled olive oil, fermented urine, and the sort of rot that turns meat into soup. And that's just the alley outside your door. Breakfast is a crust of bread so stale it might be classified as building material. You dunk it in wine that was sour last week and now tastes like vinegar with ambitions. There's no time for pleasantries or prayers. You don't own a sundial, and even if you did, your shift starts when the overseer says it starts and ends when your flickering oil lamp you call a torch burns out or your legs give up. Whichever comes first, the Cloaca Maxima awaits, Rome's greatest hidden monument, a marvel of ancient engineering, they say, built centuries ago to drain the marshes and keep the city dry. And sure, on the surface it's impressive, a tunnel so wide a wagon can ride through it, carved from stone and still flowing strong, but you're not seeing it on a marble relief in a villa courtyard. You're not admiring it from above, you're inside it, literally, knee-deep in its glory. By the time you reach the main entrance, if you can call a slime-slick archway a door, you're already sweating. The tunnel exhales a humid breath, a hot, clinging warning of what's to come. It's worse in summer when the heat turns everything to steam. But winter has its charms too. Cold that bites through your tunic, freezing your fingers around your tools, making every step a gamble on whether you'll slip and break your neck, or just lose sensation entirely. You enter with a torch in one hand and a rake in the other. Not a fine metal rake, just a stick with some nails in it, meant to scrape blockages from the flow. The torch sputters in the damp, casting flickering shadows on the curved stone walls. You pretend not to notice the movement in the water beside you. Rats, probably. Big ones, bold ones. Sometimes they follow you. Sometimes they don't wait for you to die before they chew. The tunnel stretches ahead and behind and above. You walk hunched, careful not to knock your head on the low ceiling. The stone drips constantly, even when it hasn't rained. The runoff carries more than water. Broken amphorae, rotten fruit, dead pets, and every foul thing a Roman household discards. You've seen worse than pets too, but we'll get to that. Your job, in theory, is simple. Keep the water moving. In practice, this means crouching in black muck to dislodge tangles of hair, rags and bones that clog the system. Some days, it's just sludge. Other days, it's an unholy dam of grease, straw, vomit, and things you can't identify, even if you wanted to. You jab with the rake until the mess breaks free, then brace yourself for the sudden surge. It comes fast, liquid filth rushing past your legs, splashing your arms, soaking into your tunic. You learn quickly not to open your mouth. No one celebrates you, no statues, no names etched in marble. If you die down here, and many do, they won't pause the water to pull your body out. The flow will carry you onward, around the bend, out to the Tiber. Maybe someone fishing will find what's left of you, maybe not. It doesn't matter. Rome flows on, and the Cloaca Maxima never stops. Above you, the city lives. Merchants haggle, senators posture, and perfumed matrons complain about the smell. They don't know it's you keeping it from being worse. They don't care. They never will. You are not part of the glory of Rome. You are part of the reason it doesn't collapse under the weight of its own filth. And the irony, of course, is that the filth is going to collapse on you first. You weren't chosen. No one looked at you as a child and thought, that boy's got the makings of a fine sewer worker. There was no apprenticeship, no ceremonial garb, no handshake and pat on the back. You didn't climb a ladder to get here. You fell. And the only reason you didn't land harder is because the filth broke your fall. Maybe you were born free, or what passed for it. Maybe your father was a labourer who broke his back under a collapsed wall. Maybe your mother sold herbs in the market, until the guards decided her licence looked fake and she disappeared. Or maybe you were born a slave, property traded for a donkey or a favour, or nothing at all. It makes no difference. You're here now. And nothing is going to unmake that. In Rome, where you started, matters far more than where you end up, because for people like you, the ending is always the same. You weren't a patrician, born with a family name carved into marble and servants to clean your sandals. You weren't even a proper plebeian with voting rights and a father in a trade guild. You were something else, lower, a non-person in a society that only pretends not to notice the stink rising from beneath its feet. Rome doesn't run on senators and soldiers. It runs on the backs of the expendable. People like you ground down until you resemble the very waste you clean. If you were enslaved, it might have started with a raid or a war, or a ship you never meant to be on. Maybe your homeland didn't survive long enough to give you a proper language for what was happening. They branded your arm and sold you by weight. If you were lucky, you were bought by someone who needed a cook or a clerk. If you were less lucky, you went to the pits. If you were truly cursed, you ended up here, beneath the city, shoveling human waste for people who don't acknowledge you even as you pass beneath their bathhouses. If you weren't a slave, the route wasn't much better. Maybe you owed someone money. Gambling, rent, bread. Debt doesn't need a reason in Rome. It just needs to exist. And when the collectors came, you had nothing to give except yourself. So you signed a contract you couldn't read, a bond that sounded temporary but stretched into forever. They call it nexum, debt bondage, as if Latin makes it more dignified. You're not technically a slave, they say, but you also don't get to leave. The city has a way of funneling its misfortunes downward. When buildings collapse, when aqueducts fail, when entire neighbourhoods burn, someone has to clear the wreckage, not because it's noble, because it's necessary. And when those jobs are too dangerous for regular slaves, and too revolting for anyone with connections, that's when they remember your name. Or at least your number. You don't get assignments, you get orders, you don't get warnings, you get lowered into the dark and told not to die. No one explains the hierarchy, but you learn it quickly enough. The men above ground dig roads, the ones below ground fix water lines, and the ones deeper still, down in the places with no sunlight, no ventilation, and no pity, they handle the cloaca. There's no promotion, no transfer to better work. Just a long, slow erosion of the body until you're either dead or too broken to be useful. And then you're replaced, probably by someone you once knew. A cousin, a friend, a son. You don't live in a domus. You don't even live in a respectable insula with wooden balconies and mosaic floors. You live in something that barely counts as a room. Likely shared, likely damp, likely infested. Your walls sweat in the summer and mould in the winter. The rats are bold enough to climb into your bedding. You've tried everything to keep them out. Nothing works. They were here before you, and they'll be here after. Much like your job. Once, maybe, you dreamed of something else. Maybe you imagined joining the legions, sailing to Egypt, learning a trade, making a name for yourself. But names mean nothing in the dark. Down here, you don't have an identity. You're not a man with dreams or history. You are a body in the sewer, pushing muck so the fountains above can sparkle, and the nobles can pretend Rome cleans itself. There are no records of who ends up in the cloaca, no census of the broken. You're not in the histories. You're not carved into statues. You are a footnote scribbled on the bottom of society's chamber pot. And even that's optimistic. If the gods see you, they're not speaking. If the city remembers you, it doesn't show it. You are here because someone had to be, and you're staying because someone else didn't survive long enough to keep the job. You know these tunnels better than your own skin. The Cloaca Maxima, the pride of Rome, the marvel they never shut up about, has been your workplace, your prison, and your unmarked grave in waiting for years now. There was a time, maybe, when the scale of it impressed you. The arching stone ceilings, the faint echoes that make every drip sound like a threat. But all wears off fast when the ceilings weep more than the people do, and you're the one ankle deep in everything the city wants to forget. They say the Cloaca Maxima was a triumph of engineering, maybe once. Now it's a stitched-together corpse of a sewer, ancient Etruscan masonry mixed with Roman patches and half-collapsed additions from some idiot who never came down here. The walls shift when it rains. You can feel the weight of the city pressing above your head like a curse. Tourists will one day marvel at how it's still standing. They won't ask how many bodies it took to keep it that way. There are parts of the tunnel you avoid, and not just because of the cave-ins. Some corners stink worse than others, and that's saying something. Pits where gas hovers, thick and invisible. Stones slick with grease that's been seeping for centuries. You've memorized them all. You could walk this place blindfolded, and sometimes you almost do, when the oil runs out, and there's no light left in your pathetic lamp. You still call it a torch out of habit. It makes it feel like you're on some kind of noble task instead of dragging a rake through feces at dawn. You've seen things down here that should have been burned. Clumps of hair tangled in rusted metal. Long discarded bones lodged in grates. The glint of teeth where no skull should be. Sometimes it's animals, sometimes it's not. You no longer react, not really. You just note it like a crack in the wall. Something that wasn't there last week. Something you'll probably have to move eventually, or step over, or crawl through. The water isn't really water. It's a slurry of runoff and waste and time. You stopped trying to describe the smell years ago. It's not just human waste. It's oil from kitchens, blood from butcheries, spoiled grain, mould, rat droppings, dead insects, rotting shoes, all blended together into a sludge that coats your feet, your hands, your lungs. There are days the stink doesn't even offend you anymore. It's just part of the air, like humidity, like fog, like failure. Sometimes the tunnel speaks. You don't mean that metaphorically. You've heard it groan, whistle and click. Echoes from carts overhead, stones settling, maybe the moan of a blockage finding its way free. But sometimes it's more than that. Murmurs behind you, a faint shuffle in the dark, the creak of something that shouldn't be moving. You never look. You've learned not to. Curiosity is how people go missing. There's a central chamber they used to call a maintenance hall, back when the city even pretended to care. It's half flooded now. You pass it daily, sloshing through, pretending not to see the carved inscription still clinging to the far wall, the one that names a long-dead engineer who perfected the drainage. You wonder if he ever set foot down here. Probably not. Men like that design the trap and let people like you fall into it. The rats are boldest in this section. They don't scatter when you approach. They've learned you're slow, tired, unlikely to fight back. They'll chew through anything. Ropes, wood, flesh. One chewed through your boot once, while it was still on your foot. You limped for a week and nearly lost a toe. Still worked every day. No one asked why you bled. And above it all, the flow continues. Day and night, unceasing. You've scraped the same grime from the same arch 10, 20, 50 times. And it always returns. The tunnel eats everything. It remembers nothing. That's the part that makes you tired. Not the weight, not the disease, not even the isolation. Just the knowing that this place has no memory. You could die in the middle of it, and by morning, the sewer would carry on, as if you'd never existed at all. So yes, the Cloaca Maxima is a marvel, a miracle, a triumph, but only from a distance, only to those who don't come down here. From where you stand, knee-deep in history's leftovers, it's something else entirely. It's your whole world, and it smells like failure. You do not have armour, you do not have boots, you're not a gladiator, a centurion, or even a stable boy. You are a sewer worker in the underbelly of Rome, and what you wear is less about protection and more about surviving, just long enough to regret it. Your uniform, if you can call it that, consists of whatever rags you haven't worn through yet. A tunic made of coarse linen, stained beyond recognition, hangs from your frame like wet paper. It used to be white, probably. Now it's every shade of brown and grey the Cloaca Maxima has to offer. You tie a cloth over your mouth, because someone once told you it helps with the smell. It doesn't. The stench leaks through the fabric like smoke through a sieve. All it does is trap your own breath, which now carries its own offensive tang. But taking it off is worse, so you keep it on, sweating and gasping beneath it, convincing yourself that maybe this layer of cotton death will spare you from whatever is floating in the mist. It won't. The air still stings your throat, coats your tongue, and crawls up into your sinuses until you start tasting things that should never be tasted. Your feet are the worst. You don't wear sandals anymore. They broke too quickly, and leather doesn't hold up well when it's soaked in human waste 8 hours a day. Now you wear wooden clogs if you're lucky. Flat, splintering soles strapped to your feet with twine and desperation. They keep your skin off the worst of the sludge, but they also make every step a gamble. One slip and you're down on the stone, scraping your knees on ancient mortar while the flow welcomes you back like an old friend. You've broken a toe this way, you think. There's no doctor to tell you. You just limped more than usual that week and kept working. You try to wrap your feet in cloth before slipping them into the clogs, but the cloth doesn't stay clean for more than a moment. It soaks through fast, turning to pulp that rubs your skin raw. Eventually, the skin gives up. It splits, it peels, it bleeds. The constant moisture eats away at you, day after day, until your feet resemble something better left buried. Some workers get trench foot, some get ulcers, some just go numb, which honestly isn't the worst outcome. Your hands aren't much better. You don't have gloves. You've heard of gloves, but they're for men who work above ground. Men who deal with fire or horses or scrolls. You deal with rot, and your hands bear the evidence. The nails blacken and flake. The skin cracks along your knuckles, opens into sores, then scabs over, only to reopen the next day. Your grip weakens. You start dropping tools. You start dropping torches. You start wondering which injury will be the one that gets infected and kills you in the least dramatic way possible. Then there are your eyes. You don't think about them often until they start to fail. The smoke from your torch combines with the fumes from the sewer to create a haze that clings to everything. You squint constantly. You rub your face with the back of your hand, forgetting that your hand is coated in the very grime you're trying to shield yourself from. Your vision blurs. Your eyelids swell. Sometimes it feels like there's grit in your eyes, even when you're above ground. You blink and nothing clears. There are days when your skin feels like it doesn't belong to you anymore. It's red and irritated in the places where your tunic rubs. Your thighs chafe. Your shoulders blister. You've developed a rash that started on your lower back, and now seems to be migrating north with malicious intent. There's no ointment, no salve, no medicine, just the vague hope that it stops getting worse. Spoiler, it won't. In the winter, your clothes freeze. Not figuratively, actually. You've gone underground in a damp tunic that's stiffened mid-shift, clinging to your body like a corpse's embrace. Your hands shake, your breath fogs, your nose runs constantly, which is especially unfortunate because you have nowhere clean to wipe it. In the summer, it's the opposite. The heat turns your garments into a second skin of sweat and bacteria. You develop boils in places you didn't know could chafe. Every breeze is a mercy, every shadow a lie. What you wear does not protect you. It isolates you. No one wants to stand near a man in rags soaked with sewer water. You can wash your clothes, but the smell doesn't leave. It's in the fibres now, part of the fabric, part of you. And when you walk through a crowd, assuming you're ever allowed near one, people make space for you. Not out of respect, but out of disgust. You are visible only in the way a wound is visible. Something to avoid, something shameful. Still you dress the same tomorrow, because what else can you do? There's no stipend, no uniform allotment, no Roman equivalent of hazard pay. You wear what you can, patch what you must, and endure what follows. The cloaca maxima does not care if you're comfortable, and neither does anyone else. Your job isn't complicated, it's just endless. Every day, the same routines, the same filth, the same quiet knowledge that if you stop, the city might notice, but only because the smell will get worse. No one praises a sewer worker when things go right. They just forget you exist. And when something goes wrong, it's your fault. No matter how impossible the task, you aren't allowed excuses. You're barely allowed breath. You begin by checking for blockages. That means following the flow, if you can call it that, through the central tunnels, and then into the offshoots, hunched over with your pole or rake, probing the current. You learn to feel resistance through the tool. A change in pressure means something stuck. Hair, fabric, grease, maybe a chunk of wall that's collapsed from the weight of a bathhouse above. You jab, twist, yank, and hope it comes loose without dislodging something worse. There's always a worse. When the blockage doesn't give, you wade in. The water can rise fast in these places, especially if it's backed up. You work quickly, because standing still invites disaster. The mixture you're in is thick. Sludge and solid waste and kitchen runoff, and gods know what else. You can't see your own feet. You just feel with your hands and trust that what you grab isn't alive, or sharp, or once sacred. Most of the time it's not. Sometimes it is. You've pulled bones out of these tunnels, mostly rats, huge bloated things with teeth like fishhooks, but also dogs, cats, the occasional goat. Once a human farmer, once half a jaw with 3 gold teeth still intact. You didn't keep it. No one ever keeps the teeth. They're cursed, or at least unlucky, and the last man who tried to sell some died 2 days later from an infected blister on his thigh. Maybe coincidence, probably not. Sometimes your job takes you deeper, into the ancient runoff channels below the newer additions. These places are worse. The stone is older, slicker, crumbling in ways the upper tunnels haven't yet learned how to do. You find roots down there, pushing through the cracks, clawing their way into the flow, like they're thirsty for filth. You find sections where the ceiling drips with something that isn't water. You find stains that look like they've been weeping for centuries. When the main channels are clear, if they're ever clear, you start cleaning the grates. Metal bars set across openings to keep out the worst of the debris, though worst is a generous term. When everything is already unspeakable, these grates catch bundles of rags, clumps of hair, fish bones, broken tiles, and more than a few items that clearly came from someone's kitchen, or someone's altar. You don't ask why an oil lamp or a small figurine of Venus is stuck in the muck. You just pull it out, drop it in your basket, and move on. Then there's the scraping, the work you do when everything else has been handled, which is to say, almost never. You take a flat-edged tool and you drag it along the walls, shaving off the crusted layers of waste that have built up over decades. The smell is worse than anything else you do. Not because it's fresh, but because it's old, rotted into the pores of the stone, fermented in silence. It hits the air with a violence that makes you retch even now. You wear your cloth over your mouth and breathe shallow, but it doesn't help. You've learned to scrape without breathing. It's a useful skill. You rarely speak while you work. There's no point. The air is too heavy, the echo too strange, and besides, there's nothing new to say. Your crew moves in a rhythm, each man focused on his task, hoping today is not the day a wall collapses or a tunnel floods. You communicate in gestures, in grunts, in the shared understanding of people who know that talking wastes energy and invites attention from things best left undisturbed. Breaks are rare. You squat in a drier section of tunnel, if you can find one, and chew on stale bread or dried olives that taste faintly of mildew. You don't linger. The smell settles worse when you stop moving, and the rats grow bolder when you look tired. You've learned to eat quickly, never with both hands, and always with your back to a wall. You've also learned not to ask what's in the water dripping from the ceiling above you. If it hasn't burned through your scalp yet, you assume it's fine. At the end of the shift, though really, it's just when someone decides you've done enough. You haul your tools back to the surface. You empty your baskets of waste, wash them in a trough that hasn't been cleaned since Augustus was a boy, and hang your rake to dry. Your hands are raw, your back is twisted, your eyes burn. But the grates are clear. The flow moves again. Rome will stay clean, and not a single soul will know who to thank. You are not well. You haven't been for years. You tell yourself the aches are from work. The nausea is from bad olives. The fever is from the heat, but you know better. Your body is decaying slowly, one symptom at a time, and the only real mystery is which ailment will finally finish the job. The sewer doesn't kill you quickly. It wears you down in layers like the grime on your clothes until there's nothing left underneath worth saving. Your skin is a battlefield. What isn't cracked is peeling. What isn't peeling is infected. Scrapes from sharp stones become open sores. Bug bites turn into angry red welts. There's a rash on your inner thigh that comes and goes depending on the weather. You've tried everything, scrubbing with salt, smearing on lard, praying to Asclepius, but nothing makes it stop. And even if it did, something worse would take its place. The sewer doesn't believe in recovery, only replacement. Your fingernails are no longer trustworthy. Some have gone soft, curling upward at the tips like dried leaves. Others have fallen off entirely. You wear strips of cloth around your fingers to hide them, but the wrappings always soak through by midday. You used to worry about appearances. Now you just hope the infection stays local. One of your co-workers lost a hand to something that started in the nail bed. He didn't scream when they cut it off. He was just glad they didn't try to take the whole arm. Your bowels have declared war. You can't remember the last time you had a solid movement. Some days it's nothing but blood and mucus. Other days, it's like someone poured soup down your spine. The cramps are constant, gnawing at you during shifts, stabbing through your abdomen while you try to sleep. You've shat in alleyways, in buckets, in the tunnels themselves when it couldn't be helped. You stopped feeling shame about it a long time ago. Now it's just another fluid your body produces without your permission. Dysentery is the most common guest. It arrives quietly, then ruins everything. You drink from the same barrel as everyone else, and the barrel is never fully clean. No one bothers boiling the water. That would take firewood. Firewood costs money, so you drink it as it is, brownish, warm, and filled with microscopic horrors you can't pronounce. If it doesn't kill you, it teaches you a lesson. Unfortunately, the lesson is useless, because there's no alternative. You've had roundworms. You're pretty sure they're still in there, coiled somewhere behind your ribs, stealing nutrients you never had to spare. Once, when your stomach bloated so much you thought you were dying, you forced yourself to vomit into a bucket and saw one. Long, white, wriggling. You didn't tell anyone. What would they do? Offer sympathy? No one has time for that. They'd just tell you to get back to work. Maybe suggest a bitter herb or a punch in the gut to knock them loose. Tetanus is another favourite. You've stepped on nails. You've sliced your palm on rusted iron grates. You've worked through the pain only to find days later that your jaw won't quite open and your fingers twitch without your permission. You've seen men arch backward like dying scorpions, every muscle clenched until they snapped like over-tightened ropes. No one survives that. No one even tries. You just tie them down and wait. You cough more than you used to. The air in the tunnels is thick with mould, spores, and gases that no one above ground would tolerate for a moment. Some days, you feel like your lungs are coated in something that isn't yours. You wake up in the middle of the night choking on phlegm, thick and yellow, speckled with red. You spit it out onto the floor beside your bedding and go back to sleep. If it gets worse, you'll work slower. If it gets much worse, you won't wake up at all. At night, you share your room with a rat, possibly several. One of them lives under your sleeping mat and drags scraps into the corner when you're not looking. You tried to kill it once, but it bit you and vanished into the wall. Your hand swelled for days afterward, and you never saw the rat again. You assume it died, or it's smarter than you and simply moved in next door. Either way, its replacements have made themselves comfortable. They don't bother you unless you bother them first. In that sense, they're more civilized than most Romans. You have no healer, no one checks in on you. The local physician doesn't take patients who smell like you, and you couldn't afford him anyway, even if he did. You patch yourself up with rags, tie off wounds with twine, and apply poultices made of herbs you can't name. Sometimes they help, sometimes they burn. Either way, you pretend it's treatment, because the alternative is doing nothing at all and waiting for death to show up uninvited. And through it all, you keep working. Because someone has to. Because Rome needs clean streets and functioning drains and marble baths that never overflow. And because no one above you will ever lift a finger to understand what it costs. You are the reason the filth stays out of sight. And you will die in it, diseased, disfigured, and unremarked upon. Just another body the city didn't count. There is no escaping the stench, not anymore. At first you tried. You washed. You scrubbed your tunic until the fibres gave out. You tried vinegar baths, charcoal dust, olive oil rubs. Nothing helped. The smell wasn't something you wore. It wasn't something that clung to you. It was something you had become. It lived in your hair, in your nails, behind your teeth. You would scrub until your skin bled, but the moment you stepped back into the tunnel, it returned, stronger somehow, as if insulted that you tried to remove it. You tried holding your breath once, for hours on and off, measuring each step with your lungs. It didn't matter. The stench wasn't just in the air, it was in the walls, in the mist, in the tools you touched and the food you ate, and the water you drank. You could hold your breath all day and still go to bed with it in your mouth. A sour, meaty tang. Not fresh rot, but the kind that has settled in and made a home for itself. Eventually, your sense of smell dulled. You thought it was a mercy. In reality, it was betrayal. Now you can't smell the difference between spoiled bread and the body of a drowned rat. You can't tell when a sore turns septic, or when the water you're drinking has been too still for too long. Other people still notice though. Oh, do they notice? They wince when you pass, step aside as if the air around you is contagious. And maybe it is. When you walk through a market, people shift their baskets to the other side of their bodies. When you sit on a bench, the space beside you remains empty, no matter how crowded the street. Children stare, mothers whisper, shopkeepers pretend not to see you unless you're holding a coin in your hand. And even then, they drop your change into your palm from a safe height, like feeding a stray dog they don't want to encourage. You stopped being offended a long time ago. Offense requires dignity. What you have is a kind of numb acceptance. The stench is your shadow, your inheritance, your mark. Other men wear togas and rings and family crests. You wear this, a crown of stink, a badge of your profession. You are a sewer worker, and even your sweat smells like decay. At home, if you can call the space where you sleep home, the scent follows you in like a loyal dog. It seeps into the walls, into the blanket you curl under, into the straw mat where you rest your head. You no longer notice it consciously, but it shapes your dreams. You'll drift off thinking of warm bread or summer figs, and wake to the overwhelming scent of urine-soaked wood. Once you dreamed of a rose garden. You could see the petals red and full, but every time you bent to smell them, it was always piss. You don't dream of flowers anymore. Laundry is pointless. You've boiled your clothes. You've beaten them on stones. You've soaked them in lye, but the fabric remembers. It holds the memory of the tunnel like a body holds trauma. Even the fresh tunic a kind neighbour once gave you turned sour within the hour. The kindness was appreciated. The futility was expected. When it rains, the smell changes. It rises from the ground like a ghost. Not just in the sewers, but in the streets, in the gutters. The cloaca maxima exhales through every crack in the stone, every loose grate and storm drain. The city sniffs and wonders what's wrong. You don't wonder. You know. You've been inside its lungs. You're part of the reason the stench comes and goes with the weather. There are days when you try to fight it. You light incense. You chew mint. You rub citrus peel on your wrists. Though citrus is expensive and hard to come by. Nothing holds. The stronger the scent, the more the sewer seems to laugh at your efforts. One worker smeared himself in pine resin. He smelled like a latrine in a forest. Another wore sprigs of rosemary in his collar until the other men started calling him salad. No one tries anymore. You've stopped apologising for it. People who can't stand it can look away. People who can't breathe can move. You've seen worse things than their disgust. You've smelled worse things than their perfume can cover. There's no pride in it, but there is endurance. The stench has become a part of your routine, like tying your sandals or checking your tools. It's not just background, it's ritual, a sacred reminder of who you are and what you've given up. You may not believe in the Roman gods, not anymore, not since they let you end up here. But if there is one force you do respect, one presence that has never lied to you, it is the smell. It is always there. It never flatters you. It never pretends. It tells you without words exactly where you belong. And it never ever lets you forget it. Rome loves to admire itself. It sings songs to its aqueducts, to its paved roads, to the temples that gleam in the afternoon light, and the fountains that splash like laughter in courtyards. It boasts of its engineering, of its civilization, of how it conquered mud and stone and turned them into empire. Senators point to the Cloaca Maxima on tours like it's a relic of divine origin, a gift from the ancestors. They marvel at how the city's filth disappears so elegantly underground, as if it simply evaporates once out of sight, as if the waste manages itself, as if the gods themselves carry it away. What they don't mention, what they never mention, is you. You are not part of the spectacle. You are not one of Rome's achievements. You are the shame buried beneath the praise. The thing everyone knows exists but pretends not to see. When nobles speak of sanitation, they do so with pride. When they see you walking past, they wrinkle their noses and pull their robes aside. The irony is never acknowledged. You've heard them talk about the cloaca like it's a marvel of the modern age. They use words like ingenuity and hygiene and order. They describe its flow with poetic reverence, compare it to veins in the body of Rome, pumping waste out to preserve the purity of the whole. You don't bother correcting them. You don't mention the blockages, the cave-ins, the dead animals clogging the drains. You don't tell them that you found corpses too rotten to move and had to break them apart with your hands to keep the water flowing. It would ruin the narrative. Rome needs its myths. It needs the illusion of cleanliness, of civility. But illusions require effort to maintain, and that's where you come in. You do the work no one wants to think about. You're the hinge in the empire's great machine, the filthy, rusted, creaking piece that makes everything else run smoothly. And yet, to most citizens, you are not a worker, you are not a man, you are a smell that moves, a reminder that the clean streets they walk on didn't get that way by divine will. Even slaves avoid you. Not all, of course. Some have no choice but to work alongside you. But even they, low as they are in the hierarchy, glance away when you approach. You are not just unfree, you are unclean. Ritual filth, physical filth, spiritual filth. You are pollution in human form. If a temple servant brushes your shoulder in the street, he may wash himself before returning to the altar. You've seen it happen. He didn't say a word, just stepped into a basin and poured water over his head, as if contact with you had cursed him. And maybe it has. Rome likes its roles clear. Soldiers fight, senators speak, merchants trade, slaves serve, but you exist in a grey space. Not quite a slave, not quite a tradesman, not quite a citizen anyone wants to claim. You are Rome's contradiction, essential and invisible. Without you, the city would drown in its own waste, but with you, it remembers what waste is. And no one likes that reminder. Children sometimes follow you out of curiosity. They peek from behind walls, giggling at your smell, daring each other to get close. You used to scowl, wave them off. Now you let them look. Let them see what waits at the bottom of the ladder. They'll learn soon enough. Some of them might end up down here too, if their families fall into debt, if their fathers anger the wrong man, if a fire sweeps through their building and leaves them with nothing but a tunic and a name no one cares about. You've heard poets praise the cloaca in verse. You've seen mosaic tiles that depict its construction. Stoic men in clean tunics, moving stones beneath a golden sky. No one in those pictures looks like you. No hunched backs, no open sores, no eyes sunken from exhaustion. Just the sanitized version of history, the parts worth remembering, the lie carved in marble and passed down through generations, while the truth leaks through your boots and into your bloodstream. At festivals, the city celebrates its progress. They pour wine, light torches, and toast to Rome's endurance. No one toasts to you. No one even thinks to. They raise their cups to roads and bridges and sewers without once asking who keeps those things from collapsing. You walk past the celebrations unnoticed, trailing a stink so thick it makes strangers gag. But no one stops to ask where the smell came from. They only want it gone. Still you work, because you have to, because it must be done, because Rome would rather pretend its sewers clean themselves than acknowledge the human beings inside them. You are not part of the story, but you are what holds the story up. And when it falls, when the drains clog, the streets flood, the bathhouses overflow, they will come looking for someone to blame. And they will find you. The tunnels are old, older than the emperors who brag about them, older than the buildings that lean heavy on the streets above, older than most of the records that claim to describe their construction. And like anything old, they're not always stable. You don't know the names of the men who laid the first stones, but you curse them anyway. You curse the cheap mortar, the cracked brick, the joints that groan when the city shifts overhead. No one checks the tunnels, no one repairs them unless they've already failed. That's your job, if you survive long enough to report the damage. Collapses happen. Everyone knows this, no one talks about it. There's no ceremony, no moment of silence when a tunnel gives way and swallows a man whole. It's just another entry in the overseer's log. Blockage cleared, labourer missing, replaced by Publius. No one recovers bodies, no one sends condolences. Your family, if you have one, might not even be notified. You'll just disappear into the same void you spent your days maintaining, your name remembered only long enough for someone to scribble it off a roster. Sometimes you hear the warning signs, the drip that changes rhythm, the creak of pressure above your head, a faint shift in the air, like the tunnel has suddenly remembered gravity. You pause, you hold your breath, you listen. But the problem is, the cloaca maxima always sounds like it's dying. There's always something groaning, something cracking, something that might be fatal, or might just be the echo of water down a side passage. You can't flinch every time a stone sighs. If you did, you'd never get anything done. You've seen it happen. One moment, you're working beside another man, scraping sludge from a grate, hauling a cart of waste through ankle-deep runoff. The next, he's gone. The floor gives out, and he vanishes with a splash and a muffled scream. You call for help, but there is no help. The others glance up, then back down at their work. They know better. If you try to follow, you'll fall too. If you shout too long, you'll draw attention from rats, or worse. And if the water's rising, you need to move. Fast. That's the real danger. Not the collapse itself, but what follows. The water doesn't stop. If anything, it comes faster. Dislodged debris blocks escape routes. Flow changes direction. You might be caught in a surge strong enough to knock you off your feet, drag you against the wall, slam your skull into a stone ledge that wasn't there a moment ago. Your torch goes out. Your bearings vanish. You claw at slippery brick and get nothing but mildew and blood under your nails. You've learned to navigate in the dark. It's a skill no one teaches, just something you acquire after enough near misses. You count steps, feel for curves in the wall, memorize the shapes of certain stones, but it only works if the tunnel is still there. When a section caves in, your map is useless. You find yourself trapped between collapsed ceilings and rising water, surrounded by air that smells of mold and something worse. You scream sometimes, not because you expect rescue, but because your body demands you try. Above you, life continues. Maybe the collapse was caused by a cart, too heavy, too fast, passing over a street already weakened by time. Maybe a building's foundation finally shifted. Maybe the gods sneezed. It doesn't matter. The surface doesn't notice. A wheel dips, a driver curses, a stone is replaced. No one looks down. No one suspects that, underneath their polished roads, a man just drowned in other people's waste. Some of the worst collapses don't even start with a crack. They begin with silence, a lull in the flow, a sense that the tunnel is holding its breath. You should run when that happens, but there's nowhere to go. You move forward anyway, like an idiot, like everyone else. You tell yourself you'll be fine, that the ceiling held yesterday and it'll hold today. You repeat this until the bricks shift and the world crashes down in front of you, or behind you, or on top of you. Not all deaths are instant. If you're lucky, the debris crushes your ribs or snaps your neck. If you're unlucky, it pins you in place. The water rises slowly, and you spend your last minutes soaked in panic, too weak to fight, too buried to be heard. There is no one coming. Even if they could hear you, they wouldn't risk their own lives to save you. You wouldn't either, in their place. You've stepped over too many warnings to pretend otherwise. Sometimes, you wonder how many bodies the cloaca holds. How many workers lie beneath the silt, unburied and unnamed. You think of the bones you've seen wedged between grates, the scraps of cloth caught on hooks, the teeth that rattle loose from the current like gravel. You wonder if you'll be one of them soon, just another obstruction to clear. And when that day comes, when the tunnel finally takes you, there will be no tribute, no coin for Karen, just the river, the filth, and the quiet return of your body to the system you served. You won't be remembered, but you'll still be useful, part of the flow. You work at night sometimes when the city above goes still. The bathhouses close, the market stalls shutter, and the streets quiet down to the soft clop of a lone mule or the distant clatter of amphorae being stacked for the morning's deliveries. Down here, the change is more profound. The flow slows, the noise fades. You can almost hear your own breath over the steady drip of condensation from the ceiling. Almost. Because night brings with it a different kind of sound, subtle, strange, and often wrong. It starts with footsteps that aren't yours. You pause, holding your torch up toward the low ceiling, but nothing appears. The sound comes again, soft, uneven, like bare feet slapping against wet stone. You move your own feet deliberately to match, testing the echo, but it doesn't sync. You stop. The sound doesn't. It disappears only when you call out. Not because you scared it off, but because whatever it was never needed to walk in the first place. You tell yourself it's the water, that the echo plays tricks when the tunnels are still. You tell yourself it's just the rats, too large, too bold, always watching. But rats don't breathe like that, and they don't whisper. That's what you hear sometimes. Whispers. Not words you understand, but voices, low and close, just behind your shoulder or at the next curve in the tunnel. You spin and lift your torch, your heart pounding, your mouth suddenly dry. There's nothing there, just the moss-dark wall and the trickle of filth beneath your feet. You keep moving, slowly, carefully. Your torch dips low as you duck beneath a beam that's sagged too far, and your back reminds you of every mistake you've made in life. The passage here is tighter, narrower, the kind of place where your shoulder brushes one wall and your elbow clips the other. It's where sound travels worst. It gets caught between surfaces and folds in on itself. You've walked through these stretches and heard yourself breathing behind you. You've walked through them and heard someone else breathing too. Sometimes you catch movement from the corner of your eye. A figure, perhaps, a shadow. You whip around too quickly and nearly slip on the wet stone. Your torch catches nothing, just empty space, or as empty as a Roman sewer can ever be. You laugh because that's the only way to stop your hands from shaking. You laugh, and the sound doesn't echo the way it should. That's when the fear creeps in. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, coiling kind that wraps itself around your lungs and waits. You've heard stories. Everyone down here has. Stories about smugglers who use the sewers to transport stolen goods, wine, jewellery, even people. Some of those smugglers never came back. Some left bodies that were never found. And some, they say, never really left at all. You've passed places where the walls are scratched with names, old, unfamiliar, worn thin by time. Some are crossed out, others are circled. One is carved over and over, as if someone was trying to write their way home, but forgot how halfway through. There are hiding spots too, little chambers off to the side, out of view. You've peeked into them now and then, only to find things better left untouched. Broken amphorae, a pile of half-burned scrolls, a sandal still upright, as if someone just stepped out of it. You've even found altars, small makeshift things, bones arranged in patterns, charcoal symbols scrawled on the wall, offerings that haven't rotted despite the wet. That's when you back away slowly, whispering a prayer you barely remember, trying not to make eye contact with whatever might still be watching from the dark. But the worst thing, the very worst, is when the torch dies. It happens fast. One moment, the flame sputters. The next, it's gone. You're plunged into pitch black, thick as oil, where the only sound is your own heartbeat in your ears and the trickle of water around your ankles. You fumble for your flint. It slips. You drop it. Your fingers grope the wet floor, finding only sludge and the sharp edge of something that might be bone. You don't scream. You don't want to know if something answers. Eventually, the torch returns. Your hand finds the flint, your breath comes back, and the flame sputters into life. The tunnel looks the same, but you don't. You're shaking. You're drenched. Your lips taste like copper. You tell yourself it was just darkness, just your mind playing tricks, just exhaustion. You tell yourself that a lot down here, and sometimes it's even true. Still, you keep working. The flow doesn't care if you're afraid. The city above doesn't pause because you heard voices in the drain. You scrape the walls, you check the grates, you log the blockage and mark the crack in the ceiling with a bit of chalk. The night shift ends when the sun starts to rise, though you'll never see it from here. You just feel the change in the air, the faint warmth that means Rome is waking up again. And so are the footsteps, the ones you don't make, the ones that start again just as you begin to pack your tools. You listen, you swallow, and you pretend not to hear them. Because even if the ghosts are real, you still have work to do. You find them. Not every day, but often enough that it stopped feeling shocking a long time ago. A shape caught in the current. A hand sticking up at an unnatural angle. A face you can't quite identify because time and water have taken what life left behind. They don't all look the same, but they end up the same, dumped, bloated, and forgotten. They drift into the tunnels like refuse, caught on grates or wedged in corners, waiting for someone like you to come along and clear the blockage. The first time it happened, you froze. You were younger then. You thought there might be some kind of protocol, someone to report to. You stared at the bloated corpse of a boy, maybe 10 years old, face down, hair slicked over his neck like seaweed, and waited for someone to care. No one did. The overseer glanced over, grunted something about clean it up, and moved on. You poked the body with your rake until it floated loose. You didn't cry, not then. The work didn't allow it. Now you don't react, not visibly. You note the location, the condition, whether it's blocking the flow. You do your best to move it to the side. If it's too decomposed to handle safely, you leave it until it starts to fall apart on its own. Sometimes that takes hours, sometimes days. No one pays you extra for removing corpses. You're barely paid for anything, and certainly not for services that might be considered above your station, like dignity or compassion. Most of the bodies are slaves. You can tell by the branding if the skin hasn't sloughed off yet. You've seen marks from all over. Domestic servants, quarry workers, even gladiators. Some of them probably died of natural causes, others clearly didn't. Rope marks, broken necks, stab wounds. You don't ask questions. You've seen what happens when you do. There are names that get whispered and names that don't. And you've learned the hard way which ones to keep out of your mouth. Sometimes it's a woman, hair still tangled with ribbon, skin pale and greenish, eyes wide open if the rats haven't taken them yet. Those are harder. You don't know why. Maybe because you can picture someone missing her. A mother maybe, a sister, or maybe just because the sight of jewellery on a dead wrist feels more wrong than a bare one. You've seen bangles, nose rings, a necklace once, broken in the middle like someone tore it off too quickly. You left it where it was. And yes, sometimes it's a child, not often, but enough. No one says anything about those. Not the workers, not the guards, not even the priests when a few of the older men tried to report one. Just silence, heavy and practiced, the kind that says this isn't new and never was. You'd like to think someone cared once, but the Cloaca Maxima isn't a place for belief. It's a place for rot. The worst are the ones that get stuck in the side channels. You smell them before you see them. The air turns heavier, sourer. There's a weight to it that makes breathing feel like swallowing. You know to brace yourself before rounding the next corner. You carry a hook for those. Not that it helps much. The bodies are often tangled in debris, wedged behind fallen bricks or half submerged in black muck that bubbles with decay. You have to reach in barehanded, or worse, with only a strip of cloth between your skin and what's left of theirs. One time, you found someone alive. Barely. A thief, maybe. A runaway. You never found out. He was face up in the shallows, coughing blood and bile, his leg bent the wrong way, and his eyes rolling like dice. You dragged him out and left him near the surface entrance. You didn't wait to see if he made it. You didn't want to know. The next day, someone else was sleeping in that same spot, wrapped in his tunic. So either he died or he got well enough to fight for his clothes. Either way, he was gone. You don't tell people about the bodies, not even the ones above who pretend to be interested in the infrastructure. They ask about the flow rate, the construction materials, the angles of descent. They never ask if you've seen corpses, and if they did, you wouldn't answer. What would you even say? That you've seen more dead men than soldiers do? That the sewer keeps its own graveyard, unmarked and constantly shifting? You've stopped wondering who they were. You can't afford to. Wondering slows your hands. Wondering makes you soft. You give them a glance, maybe a whispered word if they still have a face, and then you move on. The cloaca doesn't allow for grief. It allows for motion, for scraping, for hauling, for forgetting. You do your job. You push the bodies aside like everything else. Maybe someone notices their absence. Maybe not. But they're gone now, swept into the dark river that feeds the Tiber. And you keep going, because that's what you do. Because someone has to. Because the water never stops, and neither do the dead. You're not alone down here. There's a crew, small, quiet and permanent, in the way that mould is permanent. You don't know how many of you there are at any given time. Faces come and go. Sometimes new ones appear, blinking and pale, not yet moulded to the dark. Sometimes familiar ones vanish without explanation. One day, a man is scraping beside you, muttering curses at a jammed grate. And the next day, he's gone. His name already forgotten, his tools handed off to someone else who doesn't ask questions. You rarely speak to each other. There's no point. Conversations get lost in the echoes, and there's only so much to say about another day in a river of filth. When you do speak, it's in nods, in gestures, in that shorthand of shared suffering that doesn't need words. A cough means move aside. A grunt means help me lift this. A hand raised briefly means watch your head. Low beam ahead, or maybe a patch of wall ready to give. That's all the communication you need. The newer men try to talk at first. They introduce themselves. They make jokes. Some even try to hum while they work. It never lasts. The cloaca strips language away, same as it strips flesh and hope, and anything else soft. After a few weeks, they go silent like the rest of you. Not because they've learned to be disciplined, but because they've learned to be careful. Voices draw attention. Sound travels strangely in the tunnels. Better not to disturb whatever's listening. You see each other in ways most people never do. Not in the face, not in conversation, but in decay. You watch their skin break down. You notice the first time someone leaves a bloody handprint on the wall and doesn't realise it. You see the swelling in their ankles, the yellow in their eyes, the way they start to limp, subtly at first, then with every step. You don't ask what's wrong. You already know. It's the same thing that's wrong with all of you. It's just progressing faster. One of the older men, Martellus maybe, though names blur down here, coughed for weeks. That wet, heavy kind of cough that rattles in the chest and ends with a spit of something dark. You offered him water once. He waved you off. You didn't ask again. The sound followed you through the tunnels until one day it didn't. No one mentioned it. The next day, someone else was using his pole and lantern. No ceremony. No mention. Just a gap in the line that closed itself. Another slipped on a patch of moss-slick stone. You heard the crack of bone before you saw the body. Skull open like a melon. Eyes still moving for a few seconds, as if unsure whether he was allowed to stop. You stood there for a moment, not out of shock, but calculation. Could he be saved? Was it worth trying? When it became clear he wasn't getting up, the overseer grunted and waved for you to keep going. Later, a pair of workers dragged him out by the ankles. No one looked him in the face. There was one man you liked, though you'd never say it aloud. Big hands, didn't talk much, but always shared his food if yours had gone mouldy. Once gave you a spare scrap of cloth for your hand when you split it open on a rusted nail. He whistled sometimes. Just 2 notes, over and over. Then one day, he didn't show up. His tools stayed on the rack for 3 days. Then they were gone. You never found out what happened to him. You never looked too hard. You couldn't afford to care. You don't ask names anymore. You don't offer yours. Names are for men with futures, and no one down here qualifies. You refer to each other by nicknames, if at all. Limpio. Red. Tall one. Mostly, you just nod when you pass. That's all anyone expects. That's all anyone can offer. Bonds don't last down here. You might work beside someone for months and not know where they sleep, or if they sleep, or if they go anywhere at all when they leave the tunnels. Sometimes someone loses their mind before their body. They start mumbling, talking to someone who isn't there, refusing to go down certain tunnels. One man refused to touch his tools for a full day, staring at them like they were cursed. Another began chanting under his breath every time he passed a grate. They didn't last long, not because anyone punished them, but because something eventually gave out. The mind, the will, the foot on the slippery step. There's no camaraderie here, no brotherhood of labourers, just a shared agreement to endure, to keep walking through the rot because no one else will. You don't mourn the ones who vanish, you don't speak their names, you keep working. Because if you don't, someone will have to clean up after you. And no one wants that job. You pray sometimes, not because you believe it changes anything, but because old habits die slower than the men you work with. You pray to Cloacina, goddess of the sewer and of cleanliness, though the irony of that title isn't lost on you. Her little shrine sits near one of the older drains, wedged between a crumbling wall and a rusted grate. It's barely more than a stone basin and a faded relief, but you stop when you pass. Not out of reverence, just obligation, just in case. You leave her offerings, coins when you have them, bits of fruit once, a single flower you found floating downstream, miraculously whole. You set these things down gently, as if pretending the gesture still holds meaning. But there's never an answer, no warmth in your chest, no sign from the dark. Just the sound of dripping water, and the quiet certainty that whatever gods still pay attention to Rome are looking the other way when you're involved. You've seen the temples, you've passed them on your way to the tunnels, columns stretching skyward, gleaming statues, offerings piled high in bowls of bronze. You've seen priests in spotless robes swinging censers, chanting to crowds who nod along as if the gods speak directly into their ears. You've never been welcomed into those temples, not once. The stench follows you too closely. The smell settles into your skin, your clothes, your soul. Even when you stand at a distance, you can feel the discomfort ripple through the air. You don't belong there, and everyone knows it. Sometimes when you're forced to pass through a crowd gathered near a temple, the priests go quiet. They step back. Their smiles falter. One even pretended to be in prayer, just to avoid acknowledging your presence. You understand. You're not angry. The gods they serve are the gods of the clean, the living, the important. You serve something older, something deeper, something wet and foul that never needed temples to make its power known. The truth is, you're not sure the gods care about people like you. Not the Olympians, not the household spirits, not even the lairs of the sewers, who are supposed to protect travellers in dangerous places. You've whispered to them during floods, begged them when the water rose past your knees, cursed them when a section of ceiling gave way and nearly crushed you. The silence that followed was always the same. Total, unblinking, impersonal. You've watched men make their final prayers in the tunnels. Some called out to Jupiter, to Neptune, to Dis. One man cried for his mother. Another chanted nonsense, not even real names, just words he hoped sounded sacred. None of them were answered. Their bodies were found days later, if at all. Their souls, you suspect, were already half claimed before their lips even stopped moving. Maybe that's what Tartarus is, an endless sewer with no torchlight and no surface. You've tried to build your own rituals. A whispered phrase before you descend the main shaft. A touch of the wall near a certain junction. A pause before entering the deepest chamber. Just long enough to let the tunnel decide whether it will let you through. You don't know if these things help, but you're still alive. And that counts for something. In a place where bodies vanish without ceremony, survival feels almost sacred. Once, a fellow worker carved a small figure from wood, a squat, half-melted idol that might have been a god or just a misshapen doll. He placed it near the entrance to a narrow passage known for collapses. The figure stayed there for weeks. Then one day, it was gone. Maybe the rats took it. Maybe the water. Maybe something else. The passage collapsed a few days later, sealing itself shut with a groan like a sigh. You don't go near it now. Whatever claimed the figure can keep the tunnel too. You used to think about the afterlife. You imagined the fields of asphodel. maybe even Elysium if the gods were feeling particularly generous. Now, you suspect your soul will do what your body does: float downstream, break apart slowly, and settle somewhere no one bothers to name. You try not to dwell on it. You've seen what dwelling leads to: men who stop talking, who sit too long during breaks, who start muttering about signs and omens while scratching symbols into the stone with dirty fingernails. Cloacina still gets your prayers, even if they're more habit than hope. Maybe she's real, maybe she listens, or maybe she's just another lie Rome tells itself, like clean water or eternal glory. You don't need a goddess to tell you what you already know. The sewer is sacred in its own way, an altar to everything Rome wants to forget. And you are its priest, dirty, unpaid, and utterly alone. You bow your head anyway, just in case. When you finally die, it won't be dramatic. There will be no crowd gathered at your bedside, no weeping relatives, no priest murmuring rites to smooth your passage into the afterlife. You will not be washed, wrapped, or burned on a funeral pyre. You won't even be buried. You'll simply stop moving one day, mid-shift, mid-step, mid-breath, and that will be that. The city will carry on. The drains will still need clearing. The filth will keep flowing. And you, the man who gave his life to the sewer, will be absorbed into it without ceremony. Maybe you'll drown. It happens. One misstep on the wrong slope, one bad blockage that forces the water to rise faster than expected, and suddenly you're flailing in darkness, your mouth open, your limbs striking slick stone and rotting beams. You'll panic, of course. Everyone does. But no one hears your screams down here. They're swallowed by the tunnels just like everything else. Maybe someone nearby pauses for a moment, cocks their head, wonders if they imagine the sound. Then they keep working. Because what else can they do? Or maybe you'll just drop where you stand. Your body finally gives out. One moment you're scraping build-up from a grate or dragging a sack of waste toward the outlet. And the next, your knees buckle and you don't rise. A heart that beat through every fever and every infection simply decides it's done. Your face hits the stone. You slide into the flow. You might be found within the hour. You might drift for days. Depends on the current. Depends on the rot. When your body starts to bloat, it gets harder to move. You've seen it happen. Bellies swell. Eyes cloud. The skin stretches tight, then bursts along the seams. It's not fast, not always, but it's inevitable. If someone finds you in that state, they won't say a prayer. They won't cover your face. They'll just hold their breath and hook you out of the water like another piece of debris. You've done it for others. They'll do it for you. No one collects your things. Whatever tunic you owned, whatever scraps you slept on, whatever small tokens you kept tucked away in the corners of your life, they're either claimed by someone else or tossed out with the garbage. You don't have a will. You don't have property. You don't have anything that marks your existence beyond the tools you used and the path you walked each day. And even those will be reassigned before your body goes cold. If the overseer bothers to notice your absence, it's only because someone else has to take your shift. A quick note might be scratched into a wax tablet. Worker gone, replace. That's your obituary. That's your eulogy. You won't be remembered for your years of labour, for your endurance, for the way you kept the sewer from collapsing in on itself one more time. You'll be remembered, if at all, as the man whose body smelled so bad they had to reroute the flow around it until someone finally scraped it loose. Maybe your corpse won't be found at all. It happens. The tunnels are vast, collapsed chambers, hidden passages, grates too rusted to open. You could float into one of them and disappear entirely, your bones slowly picked clean by rats and time. You'll become sediment, a blockage, an unmarked mass that some poor soul decades from now will have to pry apart, not knowing or caring what it used to be. There's no coin on your tongue. You've never had enough to spare. No one places one there for you. So if Karen really is waiting on the far side of the river, he won't be paid. Maybe he'll turn you away. Maybe he'll take you anyway, out of pity or boredom. More likely, you'll drift somewhere less final, a place between things, neither remembered nor truly gone. You've lived like that long enough. Why should death be any different? No one mourns a sewer worker. There's no public notice, no family procession. If your name is spoken, it's by mistake, someone confusing you with the man who took your job the next day. Your death is just another unremarkable event in a city full of them. Rome doesn't pause for men like you. It barely noticed you were alive in the first place. And still the work goes on. Someone else picks up your tools. Someone else walks your path. Someone else breathes in the rot that used to be yours alone. Maybe they last longer, maybe not. But the cloaca maxima keeps flowing, indifferent as ever. The gods say nothing. The priests stay silent. The city above glitters in the sunlight, unaware that one of its foundations has rotted away. You are not buried. You are not burned. You are not even missed. You are flushed out with everything else the city doesn't want to see. And when the next storm comes, when the water rises, when the tunnels strain under the pressure of 100,000 careless lives, maybe a piece of you will rise up too. A bone, a tooth, a scrap of cloth no one recognizes. But no one will ask where it came from. They never do. Rome continues. That's the cruelest part. When you're gone, when your body has slipped into the current or been shoveled into a cart like refuse, the city won't pause. The streets will still hum with sandals and wheels. The bathhouses will fill with warm, perfumed water. The fountains will sparkle, glinting in the afternoon sun, as children laugh and splash at their edges. Everything above will go on exactly as before, as if you never existed, as if you didn't spend your life making sure that all this stayed clean. The tunnel you cleared today will clog again by tomorrow. The blockage you fought to break apart will reform the next time someone dumps a pig carcass down a street grate. You know this. You've always known this. Your work doesn't last. It's never meant to. It exists in a cycle. Scrape, clear, clog, repeat, until your body gives out, or the stone above you finally collapses. And when that happens, the cycle won't stop. It just hands itself to the next poor soul who needs bread more than peace. You are not remembered. You never were. Rome builds statues for generals, senators, and emperors. It carves their names into marble, surrounds them with laurels and gods. But no one marks the names of men like you. You've walked past the plaques, the monuments, the bronze inscriptions. You've seen the dedications to engineers, to architects, to builders. No one ever thanks the men who crawl through shit to keep the streets dry. No one ever praises the hands that drag corpses out of the flow. The city above speaks of legacy, of glory, of permanence. But you know better. You've seen what lies beneath. The cracked stone, the sagging walls, the tunnels patched with rubble and prayers. Everything Rome builds sinks eventually. Everything collapses, even the temples, even the shrines. The only part of Rome that truly endures is the sewer, and even that eats itself from within, collapsing in sections, crumbling under its own filth, just like the men who serve it. One day, someone will crawl through the same tunnel where you once scraped grime from the walls. They won't know your name, they won't know what you suffered, but they'll see the marks, scratches in the stone, bits of rusted metal, a tool handle wedged into a crack. Maybe even your bones if they haven't washed out to sea. You'll be part of the debris they curse under their breath, part of the mess they're paid too little to clean. And still, they'll keep crawling, because someone has to, because the cloaca maxima doesn't care about your story. It doesn't care who built it. It doesn't care who clears it. It only cares that the waste moves, that the stink stays underground, that the people above never have to see what makes their marble streets possible. You are not a citizen. You are a mechanism, a moving part in a system older than your grandparents and hungrier than your gods. You used to think that maybe one day someone would remember, that someone might write it down, what the work was like, what the tunnels smelled like, how the air changed when you got too deep. But no one writes about that. They write about victories and festivals and the texture of a senator's toga. The men who keep the drains clear are lucky if they're mentioned at all, and if they are, it's usually as a footnote to praise Rome's cleanliness. They might say, the sewers, maintained by labourers the ISO, they might say. Never who, never how. There's something final about that, not dramatic, not even tragic, just certain. You will vanish, your story will vanish, Rome will go on, oblivious, and that's the closest thing you'll get to immortality. Not a name carved in stone, not a grave marked with offerings. Just the knowledge that the tunnels will continue to rot, and someone else will rot inside them. That the stink you knew will become the stink someone else breathes. That the cycle, like the sewer, never ends. And maybe that's enough. Not peace, not justice, but continuity. You were part of something, even if that something was unspeakable. You kept the water moving, you cleared the way, you bore the weight of a city that refused to look down. And when you're gone, someone else will bear it next, just as unlucky, just as nameless, just as forgotten. So you scrape the last layer of sludge from the wall. You drag the rake through the channel one more time. You breathe in the same rot that's been here since kings ruled and slaves built empires. You feel the stone shift slightly beneath your feet. You ignore it. Tomorrow, if you're still alive, you'll do it again. And if not, well, the flow never stops. Not for you, not for anyone. That brings us to the end of tonight's descent. Not a story of heroism, but of quiet, filthy survival. If you're still awake, thank you for walking these tunnels, for breathing the same poisoned air, and for witnessing a life the world was never meant to notice. If you'd like early access to more slow, bleak journeys through history, along with perks like ad-free audio of these episodes, the Patreon link is in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment about the moment you would have given up. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find their way to these stories.